Hey, that last video, reaching out for conflict, maybe kind of worked. I got some response. You know what? This is exactly what I need. There was a comment made after that video. And you know what? That video was so chopped up, I apologize. I looked at it today and went, oh my God. Anyway, okay. Virginia, after that comment, said, are you saying the Old Testament as a whole is on the one template, or each different story is on the template? Okay, that is an incredibly... That's what I want. I want to hear things like that because it's a big story. It is. During editing, I added this in because I don't get to the point. I try to explain how things are. Let me try something different this time. Let me answer that question. Genesis, Exodus, the Old Testament, there's a variation there. The monomyths are up front, Genesis, Exodus, and I'll go into more detail here. Basically, the reason there's a repetition of monomyths, though, is it replicates the human life cycle. I am Abram and Sarai in the beginning. Things go bad. I have to become healed. At some point in time, that happens, and my old self is now gone, and my new self takes over. So I transition from Abram and Sarai to Abraham and Sarah. And that continues along. As each father dies and the next person called takes over, this represents us on our continuing journey. That's what's there. There's other parts in the Bible that are not monomyth. There are other kinds of spiritual teachings. Okay, on to my ramblings. First of all, to answer your question, I will tell you that, and then I'm going to go into greater detail about the teachings, the template, how it's held, and how I see it now. This is just something to look for. It makes it confusing to look for what is going on. The monomyth template is, like I said in that video, is coarse. My name is Dan Paulson, everybody. Welcome to the channel. Here's what the Bible is. It's a combination of things at different times. First of all, in Genesis, creation happens. That is the creation of each person. From creation, birth, up until the first flood is our life that goes up to that point where we want to flood things out. Now, what I'm going to suggest is it looks to me like Genesis came about in at least 2, perhaps 3 different variants, because there are things that are not, when you interpret them, they're no longer cohesive. It's not a flow. When you don't interpret them, there's some weird things in there. People notice them. 2 creation stories that sound different. There's 2 callings of Noah. Those are the kind of things that when you extract them, you realize, okay, these were added in later, and they are putting in numbers that are going to create a network that's going to keep it moving along. So I see that there was at first, Genesis probably stood alone, something like the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish. It probably stood alone with something like that. Had Lilith involved and things like that. The bad woman to begin with, have to get rid of her, get the new one, all that. Bad self, new self. But they changed it. They varied it to create Judaism. Yeah, seriously, if you look at it, when it starts with the Babylonian creation myth, Tiamat is the earlier self, and that's the female that gives birth to all of the bad stuff. And so it started off with a bad woman that had to be destroyed. What did we have with Lilith? It was following that same pattern. It was kind of spot on if you look at it. Okay, so what happens then from then on? This is where the repeating sequences start. Okay, we've got our creation up to the first flood, and then Noah calling, it begins Abram, Sarai. What we begin to see is a repetition of things. If we were to start in creation, there's a point in our early life where we are naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden, which represents a young, early self, conscious, self-conscious, self-aware. We have both our conscious awareness plus our inner happy, gleeful. We can remember, we know things, we can interact with the world, but we haven't really been exposed to it yet. Happy selves, naked, unashamed. We're not covered. We're not hurt. We're not lying. We're not hiding. We're not living in fear yet. We're at a happy place. It's devoid of things. We get down to Abram and Sarai right off the bat. They start off together, Abram and Sarai, with nothing. And they are in Canaan, and there's a famine in the land. This is replicating conscious, subconscious, beginning a story. We are in a devoid place. Then it's going to begin to unfold like that. We're going to see divisions, the Cain and Abel. We're going to see divisions downstream. We're going to see sin beginning in the first part of the story, but that's going to expound. What we're going to see is that downstream, the stories become bigger versions of what's already happened. And it's going to follow that same sequence because the sequence is patterned on the life of a human. Now, you could have one monomyth, which really is, it covers this. A monomyth is this way. I need to resolve my issue. I now understand that it's a problem that I'm carrying. I need to resolve something within me. So you stop and you get help. You turn inward for whatever reason and however you do it, whether it's personally, whether it's with the other individual, whether it's with a psychologist. What you're doing is working through it in your mind until whatever the offending issue was to begin with is no longer being held in your mind in a derogatory manner. So it is no longer acting out and feeling that way. And once you've done that, you come back, you re-engage with life, you make whatever changes in your living situation with the people you're with, things like that. You now have mastery over that issue right there. Boom, you're done. That's a monomyth. If, however, we are looking for what life is really like and we want to become pure, you're going to go on monomyth after monomyth after monomyth in life. And that's what begins to emerge in the stories in a network, that you go take care of something. I got a big issue. Yeah, this happened to me. This is the biggest thing in my life. It destroys me. You go take care of that first. Take care of the cornerstone of your temple. Destroy that. You come back and go, oh my God, I don't even feel like my feet are touching the ground. You have lifted yourself. No, you have unfettered yourself. You have taken something off of you. You have unweighted yourself, and you will feel a physiological, it'll feel light. But that's not going to stay that way. What happens is we adjust to new feelings, and in a time frame, you'll feel like that's the new normal. What I want to do is introduce the idea of thinking about that for a second. The elevation is going to be opposite of what has happened in life. Think of your life and think of when you were happy and a happy, just carefree child. It may be difficult to find that, but if you can imagine that part, and then imagine a time where something incredibly devastating happened and it just shook you. It ruined your world. It made you hurt. It made you cry. It made you hurt. It was not okay. But eventually life goes on and you learn to live with it. That pain that you took on, you adjust to it and it becomes sort of a new norm. That continues to happen in life. Now, when it comes time to unfetter, the same thing is going to happen. Those things that we took on that were hurtful are released, and we feel good in its place, the good that we felt before. So we're going to feel a transition that is opposite of, or that is different than what we were used to. That's going to follow us. That's going to be an indicator of our success. And as goofy as this may sound, it's this simple and it's sometimes this beautiful. Like in Genesis somewhere, you're going to be moving on by stages to the Negeb, to an empty place, but you're moving on by stages. We're going to see something in Jacob's ladder where Jacob is on the ground with his head on the ground on a rock. And his dream is what? He's going from as grounded as you can get on the earth. You are sleeping on the ground with your head on a rock. You are not elevated at all. But in your dream, you see heaven. You see way up there. And you see a ladder from where you are to the top. And you see angels along the way that can help you. You see stages that we have to take to go from one place to another, and we look for help along the way. How's that? Then you're going to start remembering something else. Okay, this wasn't as big, but this happened too. Now that one's starting to bother me. I want to take care of that. So what's going to happen in life is that we're going back to try and find out why we are hurt. What we're doing, the brain has neuroplasticity. We're trying to interact with our earlier selves and all of our memories, our perceptions, the hours that we sat in anguish, forlorn, hurting, and wiring our brains that way. We're trying to interact with that mass right now, because that is what we are living through, and that is what we became through our life experiences. So the Bible is not all monomyth. The Old Testament, you're going to find Genesis is. Exodus is. Leviticus starts a little bit something different. Okay, at the end of the day, what we know is that we are human. That there's one true reality. We are in an energy-based universe with a brain that has this organic electrochemical capacity to interact with the environment. Why not? Where does it come from? Where do we come from? This is where we come from. We emerge from there. There's one reality. And we could say that as simply as what I'm doing in plain language. You're born, you have certain qualities, you have certain characteristics. Right there. That is a teaching in the Bible. There are things that you don't have any control over. God named those. then you get to start naming things. This is me starting to come online as I'm learning life. Oh, yeah, that's a banana. It's yellow. That's grandma. Those are cookies. I like this stuff. We got all these fun things going on. We are now naming things. And then we get our inner being, our Eve self emerging from us as a result. And then we are naked, unashamed in the garden, which means, yeah, we're not, all of that stuff is there. Okay, so between those things, if one begins to look at it conceptually, one begins to realize that, that there is a template that this story is playing out on. It's repetitive, and if it is on my life cycle or the life cycle of anybody, regardless of whether you're, some little girl in Lebanon or some boy in the outback someplace, or it doesn't matter, some old Russian lady, it always works this way because we are humans and this is how life works and this is how the brain works. That is the one template reality. What I'm going to say is no matter where you go, though, that teaching is there. There are different ways of teaching that. You could have short verse sort of things. The Dhammapada, we've gone through some of that. There is no suffering for him who has finished his journey and abandoned grief, who has freed himself on all sides and thrown off all fetters. Yeah, the fetters, the things you're hanging on to, the stuff that cycles around over and over again. The teaching's going to be very clear and very plain. The Tao Te Ching, yeah, let's see. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. So that's very similar to a Buddha one, isn't it? The spokes, the wheel, all of that. The center hole that makes the whatever is inside of that hub is what makes the wheel turn. Whatever is inside it, we become the wheel, or this is our experience. We shape clay into a pot, but it's the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We are the clay pot. I need to be empty inside. Then I can put whatever I want to in there. But we tend to carry what we don't want to begin with. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. I am the house. We build ourselves. It is the inner space that makes it livable. Is it? These teachings begin to, they're very short, very simple. They're of a genre that is inward-looking spiritual teaching. We go to the Bible. I got a pile over here. The Jesus teachings are going to be the same thing when we get to that. Buddha, what did we hear? There is no suffering for him who has finished his journey and abandoned grief, who has freed himself on all sides and thrown off all fetters. All the things you're hanging on to, you let go. What's a Jesus parallel? Blessed are the poor in spirit. Spirit is what? Spirit is your inner being. Spirit is what lives in the background and creates your life when you're consciously not paying attention. And your conscious continually re-experiences what the spirit brings out. The spirit is what is up here in the mind. You want to interact with it, that's it. You cannot interact. How do you empty a spirit? Jesus telling you to do it. Buddha tells us to do it. You can see that there's something in there. And this one we just read here from Lao Tzu. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We shape clay into a pot. We make our lives into what it is. We shape life experiences into who and what we are. But it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. Jesus, wash the inside of your cup, because the one who made the outside made the inside. Same damn thing. Different verbiage. Think of it this way. You need to empty your cup. My cup is empty. My cup runneth over in a bad way. My clay pot is filthy. All of those, if you look at, I am this part, work it out in your mind. They're all going to come down to mentally the same place. This is a mind process to get it to be mentally interactive. The genre's changed. So short verse message, different genre. Look inward, look outward. On the shell. When you know there's a template, doesn't matter. You always look inward. Then we get into monomyth, and it's completely something different. They're big, huge stories that suddenly take up a lot more time and space. Every person in that story is you. It all plays out in your mind. All the places represent something. The directions represent something. East of Eden, whenever you go east, it's going to be a bad place. Whenever you go up on a mountain, it's going to be a good place. So keep paying attention, and you're going to see repetitive things happening through there. So the Bible has monomyth, monomyth, monomyth up to a point. Then it's got other things in there that are all parts of teachings, different, Psalms, Proverbs, short type of verse, different sorts of teachings that tell you to be at one with yourself, which is what? Be at one with yourself to stay connected with God, stay in with God. God remembering is when you get to the template, it's that part of us that is the detached part. I am okay out here. I am not feeling things. Then when we let that go and we start experiencing life, we're in anguish, we're hurting, we're trying to live through this place. But down here, this life and our past experience is preventing us from that. We're using our higher being and our consciousness working together instead of the consciousness just sitting there going, I don't know what's going on. Stuff just keeps happening. I'm experiencing life. We are beginning to do something different. And that is called walking with God. But that means we are experiencing our life no longer through the emotion of a blind conscience that's just looking at life, not knowing what to do, but looking at it from our detached perspective and seeing that we are physical components and energy components down there that are caught up in a sea that we are separating from. This is walking with God up here. But we're wired for many years to be a certain way, and it's not going to feel okay. So it'll take a while. Anyway, okay, so the Bible isn't all monomyth. It is other things as well. You get into Matthew is a monomyth. Mark is a monomyth. Luke is a monomyth. John is a monomyth that has a minor miniature. It was meant to be standalone. There's a miniature creation story in the front of John. Then it goes into really what the Romans decided, there are people who decided at some point in time what was going to be the valid material that goes into Christianity. There was a lot of material at that time, Gnostic material as well as this material. All right, and then to finalize what's going on in the sequence in the Bible, it's the monomyth after monomyth that, like through Genesis, Exodus, that sort of a thing. It replicates the person's life. If I'm actually following this, I'm going to go back and I'm going to heal something, and then time is going to go by. And what is happening is I start off as Abram and Sarai. And then after I go through an iteration process and I'm done, I reemerge as somebody new, Abraham and Sarah. And then it starts again. And every time there's an emergent of a new person, the old person dies off and then the father dies off, and if the father dies off and the son takes over, that means we have resolved something and now we're moving on to the next stage. I should do a video on that with a big overview. It would take a long, that should be a standalone one. Yeah, I'd have to think about setting that one up, but actually in a step back, kind of a more distant look at it, just show the big steps without a lot of fine detail on each one along the way. How it's replicating this idea that you're starting out empty, things go bad, you move on with stuff, you divide, life goes on, it gets worse, you need to resolve things, we get connected to the planet Earth, these are the stages of our life, hidden in nested stories, okay? This is the esoteric knowledge. You play it out into the mind. You translate the analogs, and suddenly it's a path inward to self-healing. How do we spot a monomyth? A monomyth is always going to be, as far as I know, a monomyth is always going to start by having a male selected somehow out special, no matter what. Jason and the Argonauts saved at birth. You got Buddha in the story of Buddha. He lived in a palace, and he left that behind. He was somehow specially selected. He saw things. He learned things. He transitioned from one place to another. We see the same thing with Moses in the beginning, where he transitioned from a poor place to a rich place, the basket in the river. What they develop in the Bible through those righteousness, in Genesis, there's that point where there's righteousness said 7 times. And because of that, righteousness now becomes that pure place. Now, every time you pick up the Bible and start reading and say, so-and-so, this starts a new one. So-and-so, a man righteous before God. Right there is the start of a monomyth. You just spotted it in the Bible. Let me find one somewhere else here in Jewish material that's not in the Bible. It's a good example. This is the books of Enoch. The words of the blessings of Enoch. with which he blessed the elect, there's an elect, and righteous. Righteous is that pure place, who will be living in the day of tribulation when all the wicked and godless people are to be removed from the earth. This is the called person, and the earth is your earth. And if you look from a distance, you see also that this would replicate the flood time. It's time to flood the earth, the time to destroy things. So this replicates a point where Noah would be called. This is the beginning of a monomyth. And he began his story saying, I am Enoch, a righteous man whose eyes were opened by God. There's the calling right there. But in real life, this means something. These are the people that have the brain types that can do this, that can see this, that can see the bigger picture, that can get out of their local area and realize that there's something bigger than this local area. That everything out there does not exist for me, but that I exist as a part of everything that's out there. There's something different. That's the person right there. All right, I'm going to pull some different examples, some fun things to look at. Here's a story that is a teaching, that is a story teaching, that is it's a monomyth. It's a difficult to see. What I'm going to do is go to something from, this is a Bart Ehrman translation, Lost Scriptures. And what I've got here first, I'm going to read. I'm going to use two examples. One of them is the Letter of Barnabas, and one of them is the Shepherd of Hermas. And let's analyze them and see what we can find in them. First of all, I'm going to go with the Shepherd of Hermas. Let me just read this. The one who raised me sold me to a certain woman named Rhoda in Rome. After many years, I regained her acquaintance and began to love her as a sister. Okay, right off the bat, what we have right here is we don't see a typical selection process, but we see a male emerging. The way the analogs are written, sometimes you come down on one side or another. You could have a difficulty leaving the past, or you can have the past telling you to get out of here. Both of those represent the same thing. You can come down one side or the other of an analog to vary it up quite a bit. The one who raised me sold me to a certain woman named Rhoda. There's a male in Rome. I don't recognize this. It's a different style. After many years, I regained her acquaintance and began to love her as a sister. Okay, we're starting to develop the male and female hierarchy that I see something that is familiar in Jewish work, although this doesn't sound Jewish. You know, honestly, as I'm editing, I keep becoming aware of more things, and this is how it grows. I look at it, and because it's something that's unfamiliar to you, but you look at it and your mind works with it in the background, and you look at it again, and you know what this is? This is a calling told from a first-person perspective. The person telling a story is the called. You know what? I've read that before, but I've never caught that before. That's amazing. That'd be a fun one to play with. When some time had passed, I saw her bathing in the Tiber River and gave her my hand to help her out of the river. When I observed her beauty, I began reasoning in my heart, I would be fortunate to have a wife of such beauty and character. This is all I had in mind, nothing else. Okay, so what I'm seeing happen up here is the one who raised me sold me to a certain woman named Rhoda. That means you begin to have life experiences in Rome. Rome must be someplace that's the beginning of life. After many years, so time has gone by, I regained her acquaintance. I'm starting to reattach with my inner being. When some time had passed, I saw her bathing in the Tiber River and gave her she's beauty. Yeah, I want to have her. Nothing else. I just wanted to be like that. When some time had passed, I was traveling to the countryside, glorifying the creations of God. We are now, being in the countryside is being in your mind and connecting and living through the higher self. And thinking how great, remarkable, and powerful they are. On the way I fell asleep, and a spirit took me and carried me through a certain deserted place that was impassable. So we're going into a void that we can't go through. There's a deserted place. That's an empty place. So there's emptiness starting off, for the place was steep and split up by the courses of water. When I crossed the river, crossing of a threshold right there, I came to level ground and bowed my knees, and I began praying to the Lord and confessing my sins. So I'm going to stop right here, but we just crossed the threshold. You're beginning to confess your sins. You've reached the place where you have to do the work. So this is like not a conventional monomyth, but you can look and go, oh, I see the vestiges of the teachings here in a slightly different style. It's still big, but it's not a typical monomyth. It's got a variation to it. I'm going to go to the Letter of Barnabas. Greetings, sons and daughters, in the name of the Lord who loved us in peace. Doesn't sound right so far. So great and abundant are the righteous acts of God toward you that I am exceedingly overjoyed beyond measure by your blessed and glorious spirits. For you have received such a measure of his grace planted within you, the spiritual gift. So it's very focused outward looking. It doesn't fit a hierarchy. I'm not seeing the development of a male or female characteristic. I'm not seeing cycles, and I'm not seeing cause and effect. I'm going to edit in little bits and pieces as I look through it again. What I see here is that there is righteous, but instead of it focusing on the righteousness of an individual as a called person, what it's doing is focusing on the righteousness of a crowd, of a mass. That does not fit the hierarchy. Let's refresh that hierarchy. We've got 5 things to look at, 5 specifically. They're not always in use, but generally we've got 5 to look at. We're going to have the higher self. That's where we can look at ourselves from a detached perspective. We have our consciousness. That's part number 2. The consciousness is where we live life to start life. We are judging life. We're experiencing life through that, losing touch with that higher self as we begin to attach to the life experiences that we are beginning to put away. That's the consciousness. But as we're putting those away, where they're going into our subconscious is where they're going into. And that is called our female part. The conscious is the male. It's in charge. It is the one making all the decisions. The female is acting out. She's the one that sins. Why is that? Not because it is anything more than the human, the conscious, the subconscious. And those are analogs. What is acting out is what we have put away. The conscious is the one that put it away, based on remembering it and deciding what the flavor of it is, the quality of it. The emotional state is how it gets stored away and how it continues to act out. So those are there, the higher self, consciousness, subconscious, plus the qualities that the subconscious is holding. So there's number 4. Those can be good things, bad things. This is where there can be variability, though. Jewish material is going to do it that way. Greek material is going to have some variation. They might have an entire island of stinky women that have to be left. Instead of saying, here's a woman with some bad offspring, they're saying, here's a bunch of bad things that we are holding within, a bunch of bad qualities that we have inside of us. Amazons coming after us, something like that, something that we have to defeat. It's still being held as a female thing, as a derogatory thing. So we see the structure can sometimes, it's not always female with good and bad kids. Sometimes it's good and bad females. That can vary. But after that, then there is one final thing, and that is the flow of life. This is the quality of life that we experience based on the nature of where we are located on the planet and the quality of what this is up here. The nature of this is creating connections, emotional connections with life and other connections with convictions. Birds of a feather flock together. We belong where we are. Look around. Do you like where you are? If you don't, if you're going to change yourself, you're not going to continue to fit there. Understand these things, that the flow of life, the way we experience life, how we feel about life is dependent upon the quality of what we're holding up here. So those are the 5 things: the higher being, the consciousness, the subconscious, the things that we're holding in the subconscious, and the flow of life as a result. We would call that God, who has called, their wife, their offspring, and the glory of God, the nature of what your life is like, how God graces you. That is it. And so I share your joy all the more within myself, hoping to be saved. For truly I see that so being saved would be being, that's looking inward and purifying yourself, emptying that cup. For truly I see that in your midst the Spirit has been poured out upon you from the abundance of the Lord's fountain. So amazed have I been by the sight of your face, which I have so desired. Yeah, and so since I have been persuaded about this, and I realize that I who have spoken to you know many things, since the Lord has traveled along with me in the path of righteousness. I have also felt fully compelled to love you more than my own soul, loving to for you. Yeah, that's not right. You don't do that. Honestly, on the template, what they would know is that as within, so without. You don't love anything outward more than inward. You can only love outward as much as you love inward. It's backwards. This is outward looking. Okay, this is somebody going, I like Christianity. I want to kiss its butt. That's what this is. Your guys, you're so wonderful and all that. It's going to go on to, things like that. I shouldn't put it quite like that, but it is. It's like somebody, it's like somebody in right-wing American politics today that has no idea what's going on, but they're, this praise, this glory, this, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, you don't know what's in the Bible. You're creating it in your image. I'm all over the place with this, aren't I? The material is very big. The Bible, to answer your question in summation, it is not complete monomyth. It starts off that way. It starts off, it's a little course. It builds up in a couple of things and then it takes off. Boom. In Exodus, it goes. To me, Genesis looks like it was modified from one thing to another. And that there are splinters off of there, like the, Enoch and things like that were kept out, that you look at them and go, yeah, they're following the same patterns. If you don't want it shown, it's because you need to maintain your religious structure in such a way that it looks convincing. People see too much and what happens? They go, wait a minute. There's something in there that's the same as everybody else's. So you don't want that. You want it to be hidden. It is. And in the Bible, as we go through, we have that sequence going through, but that sequence is a little bit more hidden. I don't know the best place to do this. The Bible, I'll get into it more, and if you ask some questions, I'll answer your questions. I can focus on things that I can see, and if I don't know, I would love to go after things that I don't know and I don't understand. If you get into the Colburn Bible, this big thing like this, it starts right off with one called Creation, the Book of Creation. Mortal knowledge is circumscribed by mortal ignorance, and mortal comprehension is circumscribed by spiritual reality. I'm going to let that one go, but I'm going to do this next verse. It is unwise for mortal man to attempt the understanding of that which is beyond his conception, for there lies the road to disbelief and madness. Yet, man is man, and ever fated to reach out beyond himself, striving to attain things which always just elude his grasp. Nag Hammadi, Gospel of Thomas. These are going to sound different at first. Jesus said, let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will become astonished, and he will rule over the all. Do you see those two are the same? Let me read it again. Let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become troubled. It is unwise for mortal man to attempt the understanding of that which is beyond his conception. So this one is telling you to seek, and you're going to find it. This one's telling you it's unwise for you to seek it. This one's telling you that if you seek it, you're going to find trouble. This one's telling you that it's unwise to seek it, or you're going to find trouble. Do you see that? They just shift the way they make it sound a little bit. Verbiage, which side it comes down on, but it's always going to be on the template. They're always going to interpret that way. But the thing to do, to see it like I see it, I mean, if I say it, do you go, wow, I see that? But then you go look at it and go, how the hell does that work? That's exactly what's going to happen until the brain, the individual's brain is wired to make that transition. You have to read it for yourself in a certain way. It's almost like learning a language or something like that. It might be easier to learn the process by grabbing something like the Tao Te Ching or the Dhammapada, which are going to be very short verses that work out in the psyche that create the initial short little neural pathways that the big stories are going to build upon. The big stories are going to be the same thing, except that now all of these people are iterations of you in your lifetime, parts of you in the mental hierarchy. It becomes a lot deeper. But understanding that almost has to happen at a more foundational level to begin with. Let me know what you think about that. I can do some current Tao or Dhammapada interpretations and just stay focused on one area and not go all over the place if you want, or something like that, if it would be helpful. I think that is how I can see it now. It's not because I know those things. It's because I've learned to see and to process it in that way. And to reiterate, it's always realizing that the story is holding a mental concept. If there's something that's a repeated, something is happening over and over again, that's this painful, hurtful thing, whether it's repeating story, repeating plagues, cycle of wheel coming around over and over again, that's always going to be there. But you have to look at that and go, that's a cycle of pain. You have to recognize the concept that's in the verbiage. If it's a monomyth that is on the monomyth template, and I want to say that I do not at all recommend Joseph Campbell. For me, as somebody that's really looking for the truth, I went through all of this stuff. I went through Joseph Campbell in the same way that I went through Bart Ehrman. I find that Joseph Campbell, when I listen to him, sounds a lot like Manly P. Hall. Yammer, 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 all kinds of secret, all kinds of mystical. They don't have it nailed down. I get tired of listening to both of them. I won't. But I have before. There's a point where you're listening to them. Bart Ehrman, same thing. It's like, boy, the lost scriptures. I've got material of his. I've got about 50 CDs from the teaching company, all from his Lost Christianities, alternate understandings, all different things like that. Yeah, I've been into that Bart Ehrman for a long time, and because there's things that you're learning and seeing in there. But at some point, I leave all of them and go, yeah, there's something you're not seeing there. Who came first is the template, and it precedes anything biblical. They're working at, little bits and pieces of papers and shards here and which one came from which and whatnot. It's the template. These are all just modern variations that were in a storytelling culture written down by hand someplace. It's not that complicated. But you have to see the template in order to know that. And if you don't see the template and can't read them conceptually, that's where it disappears. That's why people can't see them. They can't read them conceptually. They're right in our face all the time. I'm not looking at any new material. I'm simply looking at the material that we've all have access to in a different way and finding that something emerges from there, but only in a process where you are turning it inward and translating those analogous stories back onto the template, knowing that is what happened. They took that template and then created those stories. We now reverse engineer it. And the Bible, yeah, it goes on, but then it's going to tell you other things. Be good. Don't eat dainty meats. Solomon's teachings. Don't consume things that are not true. Don't learn about life from so-and-so over there who hates so-and-so over there, so you're going to join him and hate them. Don't do that. Don't eat dainty meats. That's man on man. That is first sin. That is living life attaching to effect instead of understanding that there's a cause. You become part of something that is already in place that is wrong instead of stepping back and not becoming a part of that. Okay, hope this was helpful. I go off, don't I? My head is just swimming. Questions, comments, yeah. I've got some more responses to do, so thanks everybody for saying something. Take care.